Hey everybody, this is Brandon, the founder and arranger of On Brand Music Company, and I'd like to welcome you to the fifth and final video in a series of 5 videos that I'm calling the 5 Fs. In these videos, I'm discussing some of my favorite marching band arranging techniques. The fifth and final F is formulating a sketch. And a sketch is sort of like an outline to an essay before music arrangement. And it's the foundation of every single arrangement that I do. It consists of 3 lines, which I'm going to show you here in an arrangement that I actually did. This one in particular is of Love's Holiday by Earth, Wind & Fire. And as you can see with the 3 lines, I have a treble clef and 2 bass clefs. And those staffs represent 3 primary brass sections of the marching band ensemble, which are arguably the most important. The tubas, the trombones, and the trumpets. Now I say this because they are the most valuable in the sense that the bass is carried by the tubas. Usually in the typical voice setting, the harmonies are carried by the trombones and then the melody by the trumpets. The other instruments are used as a part of what we call an auxiliary unit or an auxiliary choir, which is something I learned from Mr. Tony Fox at the University of Southern California when I studied with him. And those are like, your woodwinds, your French horns, baritones sometimes. They're used as kind of like the cherries on top, or me being a Miami Heat fan, the trombones, the tubas, and the trumpets would be like the big 3, but the auxiliary unit would be like Ray Allen. You remember that shot in the finals, the Heat don't win the title without Ray Allen. So although these main 3 instruments are important, the other auxiliary instruments play a major role in the effectiveness of the arrangement. So as I set up my sketch here, this bottom staff again represents the tubas, this middle staff represents the trombones, and then the top staff represents the trumpets. Now, when I do have some auxiliary instruments I want to write for, you can see them here. I kind of share that staff with them, but we just changed the stem direction, okay? So, for example, if you let's take a look at the first 2 bars here. The stems for the tubas and the trombones are all facing down, and the stems for the trumpets are all facing up. And I did that purposefully so that you can kind of easily distinguish where the melody is when you're using the trumpets and where everything else is with the trombones and tubas. And also it helps when you write for the auxiliary units. As you can kind of see, I've made a few sketches here, rhythms that I want to use in the French horn section, which I'm using as an auxiliary unit in this particular arrangement, okay? The other thing that you might notice is that the arrangement is in concert pitch. And I do that just to make sure that all my harmonies are spelled correctly. You can see here I kind of made some notes of what they are at the top. And then it's just kind of a reference for me to check and say, all right, if this is an A flat major 9, make sure I got everything, okay, everything's spelled correctly here. Before I do the transposition, when I move it over to finale, which is what I use for the digital part of the arrangements. So after you've completed the first 2 steps of setting up your sketch and then understanding how you're going to write your sketch, the last thing that you're actually going to do is complete it. So the key here is to stay as neat as possible. You can see I started out very neat with these quarter notes at the beginning, making sure that all my stems are quartered in the right direction, the harmonies are clearly spelled out. Another thing that I have here that I want to make note of is the notation of the notes, right? So making sure that everything is easily readable in terms of rhythmic output and rhythmic spelling, if that makes sense to you. So for example, I'll just give you an idea here. Let's say in this bar, I wanted to use this syncopated rhythm of this quarter note, dotted quarter note, dotted quarter note, and then quarter note. This might not be the easiest way for someone to read this if you're in 4/4 time, which is what this is, because when you see these dotted quarter notes, when you see them back to back like that or in succession, it kind of gives the musician the idea of you're reading in compound meter, which is like 12/8 or 6/8, the triplet feel, and it can kind of be confusing. So what I would do, I would take this and I would write it like this, which is a dotted quarter note followed by an 8th note tied to a quarter and a quarter note, because it's easier to see where the beats are open up at, right? So you can clearly see this is beat 3 and 4. You can see this is beat 1 and the upbeat of 2. So it's a little bit easier for the musician to follow along as they're reading it, and it kind of helps with sight reading and getting through the music. So after you monitor your notation, make sure all the beats are clear, and also make sure your stems are going the right way up or down for the sake of the sketch. Another thing that you might want to consider is using some shorthanded things, because it is difficult to try to write like this and keep it consistent and keep it clean. And we have technology now, so we don't necessarily have to do this and make sure that it's pretty or rewrite things specifically as they are. You can use shorthand when you're doing your sketch. So if you're looking at this, you might see some of these repeats here where it's technically not the right way to write it. But what I wanted to do was just repeat these same 4 measures here, but add the trumpets here in this accented rhythm. So instead of rewriting this, I just put these little repeats here and just added the trumpet part on top of that, because it was just an easier shorthand way for me to do it. So if you were to see this on actual music, you wouldn't play it like I intended to do it on the sketch, but it's just for me as the arranger. I know what this means. So if you have anything that you might come up with to help you with that, do that as well. I think I do it again later on in the arrangement where I take a rhythmic part that repeats in the song and just bring it down just by drawing a light arrow here and then putting the repeats. And that just kind of helped me to know that, hey, I'm going to go back to this section and I'm going to repeat what I wrote earlier instead of having to actually write it out and repeat it. Okay? And keep in mind with your sketch, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the final version of your arrangement. Again, it's just an outline. And once you put it in the computer, you might hear some things where you're like, oh, I like this, or I don't like this, I want to try this. And you can do that. But just keep in mind, this is just an outline and a foundation for your arrangement. So after you've done this, you can take it, put it into Finale or Sibelius or MuseScore, whatever notation software is your pleasure, and put it in there and make it ready for the band and the musicians to read. So again, just to kind of go over the steps to formulating your sketch. You want to set up your sketch, just making sure you have a 3-line sketch set up with your 2 bass clef and the treble clef on top for the trombones in the middle, the tubas at the bottom and the trumpets at top, and then just leave a little space at the top of the tuba staff for any counter lines you might have. And then after that, actually write your sketch, make sure that everything is clean and neat, use any shorthand things you might want, and then just complete it. And once you're done, transfer it to the computer if you like. All right, so I think that does it for the 5F series. I want to say thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you heard and found something useful, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you and be well.